Hello and welcome back to another episode of Hear the Cannons. I am your host, Colin Hallboom, writer over at BucsGameday, and I am joined by our lead editor, River Wells, from the team again at BucsGameday. So make sure you're visiting BucsGameday.com for all your Buccaneers needs. We have everything covered all season long, and especially right now. It's been a thrilling Buccaneers season so far, and they've got their toughest test yet coming up. Monday Night Football at Raymond James Stadium. It is going to be lit, for lack of a better term. Before we get into that, though, please, I want to implore you to like, subscribe, all that jazz so that you can keep supporting the show and we can keep growing our audience and keep doing what we do. So before we get into the Baltimore Ravens, which is the central focus of this episode, we didn't get to do an instant reaction. Obviously, Hurricane Milton threw everyone for a loop, and that includes our team at BucsGameday. So we weren't able to do a post-game reaction, but we did have River at the Caesars Superdome to witness live the Buccaneers trampling the New Orleans Saints 51-27. It was quite a game. I mean, obviously, anyone watching this, I would assume, caught that game. Sean Tucker went off, 192 all-purpose yards, 2 tutties. Chris Godwin, 11, 125, and another 2 touchdowns. Baker, 325 through the air, 4 passing touchdowns, but 3 picks, 2 of which you could argue were not on him. But regardless, that's what the box score reads. Tons of contributors on defense, almost 600 total yards of offense for Liam Cohen's group. That was fun to watch. An incredible second half barrage from them, especially those young running backs, the aforementioned Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving. But 277 rushing yards. Love to see it. Everyone's been clamoring and calling for a change for this team to start running the football. And ironically, or not, depending how you view it, it happened when Rachaad White was not in the lineup. River, I got to ask here. We usually have one question of the week. I got 2 for you that relate to this game. The first is, do we have a running back controversy moving forward?
Probably. I mean, not to say that, people have different opinions on Rachaad White, I think. And a lot of people have mentioned that when Liam Cohen runs gap scheme runs, he's more effective than when he runs zone runs. He's definitely doing that a lot more often, and I think it makes him a little bit more confident in his zone run calls as well. So, but yeah, I mean, Sean Tucker coming out and exploding like that's probably going to make people think that there might be, and we'll see how much they use Sean Tucker going forward. Todd Bowles mentioned the 3-headed monster potentially coming out with Rachaad White, Sean Tucker, and Bucky Irving. So we will see how that goes. I expect Rachaad to get some touches when he gets back into the lineup, but I think with what he does with them will be it'll be under some more scrutiny, I think, given that you had Bucky and Sean do that in a game for their best rushing performance of the year so far.
I'm glad you brought up the change in the running scheme, like kind of not abandoning completely, but that outside zone scheme that they've been really trying to hammer throughout those first few weeks of the year. It speaks to me to Liam Cohen's flexibility as a play caller, which you want to see. You don't want to see that stubborn, sorry, but Byron Leftwich type of approach where you just refuse to adapt. And Liam Cohen has already shown us this through various avenues of his play calling and just schematics and his approach in general. You love to see that, but I want to stick on that topic then, because first off, the Bucs O-line, according to PFF, I just checked, they've moved up to number 2 in the rankings heading into this week because they had such a dynamic performance. I think it's just entering this week, though, so it's not like a whole season, but still. And a big reason, you got to give credit where it's due. Robert Hainsey steps in for Graham Barton, who missed that game, and was awesome. Tristan Wirfs was awesome, of course. But it begs the question, with Ben Bredeson being, probably the weak link of this team with Cody Mauch playing better the last few weeks, would it make sense? I know it could make sense in theory, but there's more to it than just make it. What about moving Hainsey over, sliding Bredeson to a reserve role, and moving Hainsey into the center spot and sliding Graham Barton over to left guard? What are your thoughts of that? Is that too much to put on the rookie this early, or is that something that they should be considering, River?
I personally am not a huge fan of that. I think they drafted Barton to play center, and that's where they've trained him. And Bredesen hasn't been amazing, but I think there's a reason why Hainsey's not playing center. He definitely had a great game against the Saints. Definitely showed up when he needed to in lieu for Barton. But I think with his size and the way he's played in the past, I think there's a reason that they wanted Barton to play at center position. So I'm not entirely sure how it would go for an extended period of time, and we don't really know. The game's on Monday. So we don't know what the status for Graham Barton is for the Ravens, given that the injury report comes out tomorrow, not today. So that's something to keep in mind. So whether or not we see Hainsey again on Monday remains to be seen. But yeah, I don't know if for an extended period of time he would replicate those results. But again, depending on what happens with Barton's injury, we might not have a choice to find out. So we will see how it goes.
Yeah, and I think in general, the offense, certainly like you're alluding to, the offensive line, you got to take their performance with a grain of salt. That Saints D did not look good. They did not look good in that
It
game.
didn't, but I think we should still give credit to Hainsey. I mean, I think he was one of the best linemen, that played there, and he did really good work. And again, whether or not you want that to be a regular thing remains to be seen. But Baker talks about that next man up mentality. He said that for Sean Tucker, it was beyond that next man up mentality, and I think honestly the same could be said for Robert Hainsey. I think he played a great game.
Yeah, nice. Let's move forward now and focus on what will be undoubtedly the Bucs' toughest test so far this year. They're looking pretty good at 4-2, man, I would say, and especially when you can looking back's tough, right? Losing that game to the Broncos and then how they lost in such heartbreaking fashion to the Atlanta Falcons in a game that they had, they totally had. But it's been a good start, I think, no matter which way you slice it, as you look and see they're 4-2. But they're facing a Baltimore Ravens team, a little shaky off the top to start the season, but they're now 4-2 and they're absolutely rolling. I want to focus on their offense. First in total yards, first in rushing, and still eighth in passing. That's a lethal group. Derrick Henry has obviously provided them with that new dynamic, that added element to what is already an extremely threatening run game. Tell us a bit about your perception of the Ravens offense and what the Bucs are going to need to do to mitigate the damage on Monday night.
They're fast. I think that's really going to be the key to look at here. Derrick Henry is way too fast for how big he is. It doesn't make sense, quite frankly. But obviously, Lamar Jackson is fast as well. They've got fast receivers on the outside. The thing I really want to see on Monday is to see just how much the Ravens commit to potentially a bootleg sort of style offense, because the Broncos and the Saints have both used the boot against Todd Bowles' defense, and it's worked pretty well. The Saints did it pretty well in that second quarter where they scored 1 trillion points. And, of course, Bo Nix and the Broncos utilized it constantly. And Lamar Jackson is definitely fast enough to make that happen. But I'm curious to see if offensive teams are now identifying this as a potential weakness in the Bulls defense, or if it's, some one-offs and they end up just going with a different sort of scheme. So that'll be fun to watch. Their tight ends have been a little bit not as productive this year, but you always kind of got to watch out for them because they are, pretty athletic. Guys like Mark Andrews, guys like Isaiah Likely, and man, having KJ Britt there and seeing what they do at the linebacker position, you're going to need some athletic, fast guys there that can be able to keep up with those tight ends. So curious to see what that ends up looking like with Servassier Dennis still on IR. They can beat you in a ton of different ways. They're very quick. Bowles has talked about wanting to get his defense to the ball, swarming to it, and they're going to need to, because this is going to be one of the teams that really tests, how well can you play defense against a incredible offense like this, and we'll know a lot about that by the time the game ends, I think.
Yeah, that's for sure. I was talking to David Harrison, who runs the Locked On Commanders site and does some work for us still here at BucsGameday. Locked On Commanders and Commander Game Day as well. So he's contributing through multiple avenues, but because they just played the Commanders, obviously, in a good game. And, I wanted to know, what is it that the Ravens were able to do to be successful? And he talked about how defenses are so concerned with Lamar Jackson's legs, as they should be, that often they kind of give up the middle of the field a little bit. They can over pursue on that, focusing on the contain, and Lamar's been doing a really good job. I mean, Mark Andrews had his coming out game. They're dunking it over the middle. Zay Flowers, those guys in the middle of the field. And that kind of scares me when you see that the Buccaneers are depending on KJ Britt to occupy some of that space as a defender at times. So potentially, depending how that shakes out, that could be a real concern if the game doesn't work in the Bucs' favor. Defensively, they are great against the run. Talking about the Baltimore Ravens, right? They run the ball and they stop the run. However, lots of struggles defending teams through the air so far.
Lots.
Do you think that's legit? Are those numbers going to kind of regress to the mean a little bit, or do you think this is a pretty good indicator so far?
No, I mean, I think through these games, I think it's definitely a trend to take a look at, and they've played some pretty good passing offenses, obviously, but I think the Buccaneers are quite good passing offense. Baker Mayfield, I believe, is the most touchdowns in the NFL, 15. So there's a lot of stuff to go with there, and I think that's going to be an area where the Bucs are going to have to attack them because the run game was really great against the Saints, and I don't know if it's sustainable against a team like the Ravens, who are going to have a stouter defensive front. They're used to playing that type of game. I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. I think you're really going to have to have those 4 touchdown games in Baker Mayfield, I think, to have a chance at winning this one because you're going to have to put up a lot of points to the air and exploit that weakness.
Without the interceptions, I mentioned them off the top too, right? Versus the Saints, you got 3 picks there, but they still managed to get it done. I think we are going to need to see the best version of Baker in order for them to have a chance in this game. Talking about matching up with the Ravens defense, I think like something was going on with Mike Evans last game. Clearly, he was in and out of the lineup. He clearly appeared to be laboring. Do you have any updates on Mike Evans at all? Is he injured? Have we heard anything about that, River, coming out of New Orleans?
I don't think so, but I think you're right. Going to the locker room and coming back, and people mentioned he wasn't very productive for the rest of that game, and I think that's something to watch because the Saints were sure giving them a lot of looks. I think so. The first injury report, like I said, is going to come out tomorrow. It's a Monday night game, and we'll know a lot by then. We'll also get to talk to Todd Bowles tomorrow, and I'm sure we'll ask him about that as well, given that you're right. It was weird. He went into the locker room, and then he came back out. Was pretty invisible for the rest of the game from that point on. Chris Godwin, as we know, got 1 trillion catches for 1 trillion yards and a touchdown. So he played a great game there. But it would be nice to have Mike in any respect, at any point in any game, but particularly against one of the best teams in football, which I think the Ravens kind of are after that. They started out 0-2, and they've been just red hot since then. So I'm excited to see this matchup. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to say a lot about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So hopefully Mike Evans is a part of that. But if not, we'll see.
Yeah, if he's not, I have serious concerns. I mean, Jalen McMillan, missed a week, comes back, really looking a bit lost out there. Like, useless as a blocker. Doesn't look like he wants to stick his hat in there. And I get it, that's not his primary job, but you got to show that you're willing to, at least, like how Godwin does and Evans at times, Meanwhile, Sterling Shepard, he's doing exactly that. He's got flagged a few times because of it, but you love to see that tenacity from the vet. What I'm saying is, I feel like Jalen McMillan, there was a lot of hype coming into this year, and then all of a sudden that's quieted. Thankfully, Sterling Shepard has stepped up. Trey Palmer's still on the shelf. I mean, who do you think is the wide receiver 3? Is that Sterling Shepard moving forward?
Right now, I think it has to be. If Mike Evans is there, I should say. I don't know if you should give up on Jalen McMillan. I think he's young. I think getting more game time will be good for him. He has not looked incredible, but he is coming off a hamstring injury, and I think it'll be important to get him those reps and to keep playing him because I think he has that talent. He needs to put it together. He also wasn't great receiving punts either. He struggled in that area. He had the drop that led to a Baker Mayfield interception. So to shake those things off and to get into a groove, I think it's important to stay at game speed. So I always, in my opinion, I like going with the younger guy because Sterling Shepard, is a veteran who's played a lot. But in this case, I think McMillan has a higher upside, and I'd rather get him the reps. And if it's disastrous, it's disastrous. But I don't know if Sterling Shepard is heads and shoulders above where Jalen McMillan is to be playing the wide receiver 3 position. But had a great game, 2 games ago, and had a little bit of a rough one for sure against the Saints, I think. But there's that chemistry at Baker. But if I were Tampa Bay, I'd like to stick with McMillan, see what he can do, and go from there, depending on what happens. So you might if Evans is out, you're gonna play both of them. So it doesn't really matter. But if he's not, we'll see what direction they go. I like McMillan. I still think that he can get some of that experience going, and Shepard has some chemistry, but as a veteran, I'd go with the younger guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean Todd Bowles, I feel like is one of those dudes who's pretty loyal to veterans too. So if he's not seeing it from the
For
look,
sure.
you know.
For sure. Yeah.
But okay, let's talk about the matchup that we have on the field. Okay, we've talked a bit about the Ravens, their offense, their defense. From the Bucs' perspective, what do you think is their biggest advantage coming into this game against such a good, well-rounded football team that's really rolling right now?
The passing game, Liam Cohen, Baker Mayfield. I think Chris Godwin being as reliable as he is very important, and I think it's a huge advantage for a team that doesn't really stop the pass very well. Hopefully, Mike Evans is playing. If he's not, even still, Liam Cohen has a lot of different ways that he can attack you, and I think that's going to be tough for the Ravens because they struggle against teams like that, defensively at least, and opening up that passing game is going to be important. So I think it's a big advantage. You're going to need to also run to kind of, make it so that you're able to open up that passing game, I think. But that's going to be a big advantage with how good Baker Mayfield's been and how many touchdowns he's thrown this year.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll see. You're right. It's that challenge of like the two sides to it, whereas the Bucs want to establish the run to set up the pass, or vice versa, however you have it. But the Ravens are so good against the run, so do they abandon it completely? And then the Bucs coming off such a fantastic running performance, like they've vaulted up. I think they are, depending what metrics you use, they're nearing the top 10 for rushing offenses. Like that's pretty crazy how quickly that can swing from what we were talking about a couple weeks ago.
You want to be able to sustain that, absolutely. And this is going to be a great test to see if they can do that against one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL. So I think the Bucs are probably excited to see what happens there. I know fans are. I know I am. So that'll be fun to watch.
For sure. How about the Bucs' biggest disadvantage against the Ravens? I mean,
this is a good question. I'm a little worried about Jamel Dean's absence. And it looks like he's not going to be playing because if you saw his injury in New Orleans, he was having trouble walking up the field with his hamstring injury. If you have Tyreek Thunderberg starting there, that might not be good. Especially given how the Ravens have a ton of star wide receivers, but they can do enough damage in a lot of different areas. Tight ends, Zay Flowers, McCollum will probably be on Zay Flowers a lot, but not necessarily all the time. That missing piece might be important because if Lamar Jackson and the Ravens can kind of exploit those weaknesses and those lapses in the secondary, which it seems like the Bucs haven't had a healthy full secondary for like years now, but. Seriously? That might be something to watch. Yeah, that might be something to watch. The other thing I would mention, KJ Britt, we're going to see how he can hang speed-wise with this Ravens offense. If he's able to keep up with that in coverage, he's going to need to because they're fast and they can beat you in a lot of different ways. And being fast is a big part of what makes this Todd Bowles defense effective and that bend don't break sort of mentality. And if he can't keep up with the speed, they're going to have a long day. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, man. Beside Buck's biggest disadvantage, I just have KJ Britt written down with a big circle around him. I love your point about Jamel Dean. That's important, man. And I feel like people are kind of a little hard on Jamel Dean, like they're expecting him to be some like star corner, but like he's pretty dang good. Like I feel like we take it for granted, and it'll be a game where you don't have him, and Zion McCollum's your only reliable outside corner at that point, like where you really start to see the value of a Jamel Dean, in my opinion. But KJ Britt, like I'm scared. I think Bucs fans should be very worried about this matchup for him. I mentioned the vulnerabilities that can exist when you try and defend or keep Lamar Jackson at bay as a runner, opens things up in the middle of the field often. A guy like KJ Britt, who is really a legitimate liability. I don't like to throw that word around, but you mentioned Savasier Dennis being out as well. Like they're going to roll with Britt, it looks like. And in coverage, that is a matchup that could get absolutely exposed by a team that plays with not one, but two tight ends who are especially capable as receivers in Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. That matchup scares me. What about a key, like random matchup to watch? Like, do you have one in mind for this game that you'd like to share with us that you think you're going to be especially keeping an eye on, maybe if you haven't mentioned one already?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Zay Flowers, and I'd like to see how he does against Zion McCollum. McCollum's a very fast corner himself. Obviously, his physical traits have been a big part of his whole game. And Flowers has done well as a wide receiver in that offense, and he's one of their biggest wide receiving threats, in the room. So if you can shut him down with McCollum wherever he ends up playing, I don't know if McCollum's going to be on him 100% of the time, like I mentioned, but if you can really halt him and kind of take him out of the equation, I'm curious to see how that Ravens offense would react. Maybe by using tight ends more, maybe by just running Derrick Henry. There's so much they can do, but I would like to see that matchup because McCollum's been fantastic this year. I mean, phenomenal. And anyone who's listened to me talk on this podcast before the season starts, I was not a big fan of his. I thought it would be a little bit risky starting him as an outside corner, and he has absolutely exceeded all my expectations. Proved me entirely wrong. He's been great. So to keep up that play against the guy and taking away one of their biggest wide receiving threats, I think will be the key matchup.
Gotta love a guy who's not afraid to call out his own takes, his own cold takes. I got a lot of respect for that, River. Not everyone in this industry does. You love it almost as much as you love.
It's on tape. He's fantastic.
Yeah. You know what else is on tape is Zion McCollum on this podcast coming into the season, and he was one of my favorite interviews we've done. So if you haven't checked it out, you should go back, have a look on this very channel, and you can see just how professional and intelligent and articulate Zion McCollum is, because he blew me away in that interview, and hard not to become a fan after you get to hear him talking in that more laid-back atmosphere. But that dude is all ball all the time. PFF's #1 rated corner in the NFL. Pretty incredible. He's maintained that spot for a while. And I know PFF is not the end-all, be-all or anything close to it, but when it matches, when the analytics match the eye test, that's always a pretty good indicator. Incredible pick this past weekend, too. And funny enough, I came across this research from an article I'm working on. Tyke Smith, rookie nickel corner, he is top 12 rated according to PFF grade of all corners.
He had a hell of a game against New Orleans. Absolutely.
Hell of a game. But on the season, he's top 12. That shows you he's just quietly been really solid. That gritty dude who you can blitz. Like, he's got that Antoine Winfield-ness to him. Like,
versatile at nickel corner, which is this Todd Bowles defense is very complex. It's very complicated. There's a lot of moving pieces. You gotta have those players, and Tyke Smith is looking to be like he could be one of those players from that nickel spot. Bowles is a ton of different stuff, blitzing, the coverage, and he's handled all of it very well. He's tackled well, especially in a time when sometimes the Bucs aren't tackling very well. He's made some good tackles. He had that forced fumble, and he could have had a second one against the Saints, and he had that pick. So he's been all over the field playing good football. Excited to see how he develops into a player.
Big time. Seems like a Todd Bowles guy, and Todd Bowles is using him like he's a Todd Bowles guy. Before we move on from the matchup to watch, a couple I'll have my eye on is like Todd Bowles versus Todd Monken. Of course, we're talking about the one-time Buccaneers OC, spent some time in Georgia with Tyke Smith. Actually, lots of connections there, although on the other side of the ball. And, Monken versus Bowles. We'll see how that goes. Todd Bowles got to find a way to make something work, because I don't think his defense is playing overall how he expects them to. They're going to have to – they've had to battle injuries, and they'll have to continue to do it in order for him to get the most out of that group. That needs to be mentioned. But that's an interesting one. And then, of course, Derrick Henry isn't going against one player in particular. But if you got one player who is good at stuffing that run, it's Vita Vea. And I think Vita Vea is having a great season so far, despite that sprained MCL in that game versus Detroit.
MCL,
missed one game, and he's just been wreaking havoc, man. Couple sacks too, but he's
playing some really good football.
Yeah.
And the thing about Vita Vea is that, he played really well to start his career. And then I think he hasn't played to that standard for a bit. So you have people talking about him like he's a certain type of player. And then, he wasn't quite producing that way. But this year, especially, I've seen some of the best football I think I've seen from Vita Vea. And he's playing really well. And he's become a really big anchor point at the line, like a lot of people expected him to be ever since that Super Bowl run. So
he's always had the potential to be disruptive, and he'll show you these flashes, but I'm just enjoying the consistency we're seeing from Vita Vea quite a bit. Okay. Usually we do like a prop bet of the week. Props haven't really dropped at most books for a game on Monday night. So I'm just going to throw this at you, and then I'm going to let you transition into giving us your score prediction right off the bat, River. The line on this game at this point, depending on which book you're using, is Ravens -3.5 on the road. Would you be, what side of that do you like? And tell us why, and then you can work in your score prediction along the way.
I'll be a Debbie Downer. I think the Ravens. That's a good line. I think the absence of Jamel Dean. We'll see what Mike Evans is doing. Hopefully, Graham Barton is back for the Buccaneers. If he's not, it's a whole other conversation. This Ravens offense is fast. They can attack you from a ton of different ways. Todd Bowles' defense has kind of been struggling, especially against mobile quarterbacks. You saw what Jaden Daniels was able to do in week 1 from the pocket. Lamar Jackson might be doing something similar. And we talked about the KJ Britt matchup with speed. I think this Ravens team is really good. I think it's possible the Bucs can take one of these wins from this brutal schedule. They have to beat Atlanta, obviously. Outside that, Chiefs, Niners, Ravens. I think they can take one of those wins. I don't know if this is the one. So we'll see how it goes, any given Sunday. And the Bucs are a good football team. But this Ravens offense, I think, is particularly tailored to a lot of their defensive weaknesses. So I think that Ravens line is something good. Score prediction is tough. I'll go Ravens. 27, Bucs 23. We'll go with that, which would be, that's 4 points. It's right outside the line there. But they could keep it a little close. It could be a little bit more than that. But I think the Ravens are going to take this one. We'll see, though.
Yeah, I like my score prediction I jotted down would be Ravens 27, Bucs 24, which I guess would cover, but not win them the game, of course. But that's just, we'll see. I hope I'm wrong. And shout out to Christopher Cole watching on YouTube. Christopher, thank you for joining us always. And don't be afraid to get those comments in, questions, all that. We'll try and hit them up during the show. But if you're joining us for the first time, please make sure to turn on that bell, click subscribe, and make sure you're checking out BucsGameday.com for all your Tampa Bay Buccaneers news and opinions. And we will, I think we've had nice and efficient here. We're gonna hop on out of here. So thanks for joining us, folks. Until next time, go Bucs.